Hello everyone, welcome to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today we are doing part 6 of our deep dive into the Chicago film history, and particularly the film industry. So glad to have you all here. We have a few things to look at before we start the next chapter. It's covering stuff from last chapter with Bell and Howell. And yeah, should be good today. Hey Jason, I see you there. So I do have some videos here to show, so just give me a moment. I was at an antique mall earlier in the week today, and I came across some Bell and Howell movie cameras, and they're from the 1930s to the 1960s. And we're going to take a look at these here. So I did video of this. But this will give you a good idea of what Bell and Howell eventually started making. So I believe it was either this camera or the one after it that had an automatic cartridge loading mechanism in there. But you can see that there's a handle. It was kind of heavy. And then here's another one. This is from the 1960s. And this is the one with the cartridge inside. So there was already a film cartridge that you could buy preloaded. And you could stick it inside of this device. And you'll see in a moment I open the side hatch there. And you'll be able to see the actual cartridge that you would use to shoot your films. Yeah, so this is 8mm, and I think there was an option for 16 as well. So clean though, look at that metal. It's like barely used. So I guess this wasn't the cartridge one. But I do have video of the cartridge. And I do look through the viewfinder here. I'll get a better angle of it in a moment. But this is what was being mass produced from the as early as 1907, from what one of the pamphlets said when Bell and Howell was founded. We can get a good idea with the red box, the yellow box, the framing. Just very simple stuff, but it worked. And I think that's showing that it's 25 feet of film. And you can adjust on the front there the intensity of the light. Now here's a manual for a projector that is also from the 1960s. So Bell and Howell did last for quite a while, and we're going to find out that the Chicago film industry does sort of taper away by the 1930s. But here's just an overview of what all of this was. Let's pause this for a moment. We suggest that you retain this booklet for reference purposes. It not only contains complete and up-to-date data pertaining to film accessories, but it also provides much valuable information on how to secure the various professional effects which you will wish to incorporate in your film. It says copyrighted 1938. So I think that rectangle one with the side panel, that was from the 60s. This is from the 30s. But I wouldn't be surprised if they continued making it for 30 years. And I do show the projector shortly after this. But, yeah, still looking through the manuals here. I was glad to come across this earlier in the week. And I figured I'd film a little video, show all of you what this looks like. What Bell and Howell eventually became from their beginnings. And you can see that it's manufactured in Chicago. This is a vial for oiling up the projector. The cap comes off. There's a little needle that sticks into the hole to seal it. I thought that was pretty cool. I do think I open it here. Yeah, and you can see the needle tip there. It's a very clever way to store oil. There's a projector. Yeah, you can see this was 3 days ago I found this. And I believe this one was more in line with the 1960s model. That's what it appears to me to be here. And that's that. So that was my little extra treat I wanted to give you guys today. So we have a new chapter that we're going to go over. We'll be covering Broncho Billy. So just let me set this back up here, and we will begin. Hope you're all having a good Saturday. It's a little overcast here. We had a bit of rain yesterday here in the Midwest. So we have about 10 pages to read today. That is not what I wanted on the screen. I'm sorry about that. What the heck? What's going on here? I don't know how that news article ended up in there. We'll fix that. Just give me a second. But yeah, we'll be talking about Broncho Billy today. And I did a little searching before I started this. And he was born in the U.S. He is Jewish in ethnicity, religion. So we're starting to see the Jewish influence on American film. This should be correct now. So there was one news article that I saved that ended up on there. Sorry, guys. We jumped 120 years into the future by accident. We're back. We're back, though. Alright, so Chapter 6 is simply titled Gilbert, Broncho Billy Anderson. So let's begin. In the silent film era, trains and movies were a match made in heaven. The early filmmakers knew that movement itself was what most excited movie audiences, and nothing symbolized movement in the industrial age like the locomotive. From the Lumiere brothers' arrival of a train at La Ciotat in 1896, which according to legend, caused early audiences to flee in terror as a train progressed towards the camera, and therefore, by extension, also towards the viewer. Through the simple panoramic films dubbed phantom rides that saw cameras being placed aboard trains to create a "you are there" effect, to the incredible locomotive imagery in the late silent masterpieces as disparate as The General from 1926 by Buster Keaton, and Man with the Movie Camera, Sholovik's Kino Apparatum from 1929 by Dziga Vertov. It's probably Dziga Vertov, spelled D-Z-I-G-A-V-E-R-T-O-V. No other single image is more closely associated with silent cinema than that of the high-speed train. And there's a note on the bottom here. It says, anecdotal evidence strongly suggests that at least some viewers were genuinely scared by early movies. In a 1977 hand-typed memoir, Eloise Webb Johnston, Adam Selzer's great-grandmother, remembered being a little girl in her father's theater, The Lyric, which opened in Seymour, Iowa around 1905. Quote, I have a vague memory of seeing a lot of horses on the screen of our picture show and, fearing that they were really going to run over me, I went to the stairs and sat on the top step until the show was over. We have a photograph here. It says undated publicity photo of Broncho Billy Anderson, courtesy of the Chicago History Museum. And that's also him on the screen in the slideshow there. In 1896, there were at least 6 theatrical plays being produced in different parts of the United States that involved trotting out on stage an elaborate puffing locomotive. Thomas Edison, who had dabbled in the development of electric trains before turning his attention to motion pictures, saw one such play in New York City, a 4-act melodrama entitled The Great Train Robbery by Scott Marble. Impressed by the play's narrative as well as its special effects, Edison mentally filed it away as a potential subject for a future motion picture. 7 years later, he would realize this ambition. Movies in the early 20th century were slowly making the transition from one-shot actualities into more complex multi-shot narratives. The European story films that were being duplicated, not always legally, by Edison, Selig, Spohr, and others, were widely distributed in the United States and had become increasingly popular with American audiences. This was especially true of science fiction/fantasy movies showcasing trick photography and special effects, such as Jorge Méliès's Trip to the Moon, Le Voyage dans la Lune, 1902. I can't speak French. I'll do my best here. and crime films involving exciting chases between police officers and criminals, such as A Daring Daylight Burglary from 1903 by the English director Frank Modershaw. In order to compete, the American movie studios soon found it necessary to imitate both the form and content of their European counterparts. A few years later, it would be the Europeans who would be copying the Americans. This kind of back and forth influencing, spurred by widespread piracy, meant that the language of cinema had begun to develop at a very rapid pace, and would become extremely sophisticated by the end of the decade. In 1903, W.K.L. Dixon's American Mutoscope and Biograph Company strengthened its commitment to using motion pictures as a vehicle for telling stories. In September, they began producing the first westerns, a genre that combined the narratives of the English crime films of the day with the purely American iconography of the popular dime novels and stage shows about cowboys and Indians and the settling of the West. This time, though, it was Thomas Edison who would be behind the blockbuster movie that effectively inaugurated the new genre and established its core inventions. I'm just checking the chat here. Yeah, I heard a few people went and saw that movie. I had mixed reactions. I got someone that was much older that went and watched it, didn't care for it. And you're saying you liked it, so that's good. I didn't know they released it in 70 millimeter. I've been so behind with what has been coming out lately. But that's good to know. Yeah, I heard about that. I saw the trailer for it. I don't like fiction mixed in with what's supposed to be like historical accounts. So I kind of tend to stay away from those types of films. Yeah, I can't remember, but there's a few films that I just don't like watching because it's saying that it's historically accurate when it's not. But you even have films like Gettysburg that has a lot of fallacies in it, but people still enjoy watching it. I guess you can say some of these films, you have a few scenes and sequences that are worth saving the entire film for. But overall, a lot of these filmmakers and directors did not... it's either they didn't care or they didn't do their homework. Because there's a lot of inaccuracies in historical movies. And, yeah, Buster Keaton's in the slideshow here with Broncho Billy. He was the guy standing in the center, that one of the trio pictures here. Well, yeah. All right, let's continue. In 1899, former projectionist Edwin S. Porter joined the Edison Manufacturing Company as a camera operator and director. By the time he made The Great Train Robbery at the end of 1903, Porter had already directed at least 45 short films and served as a cinematographer on many more. In this astonishingly prolific run of movies, Porter proved himself a true pioneer, if not quite the father of the story film that some histories have claimed. He was responsible for popularizing many of the rules of movie grammar that turn of the 20th century audiences were expecting for the very first time. A good example is Life of an American Fireman from early 1903, a rescue film that renders space cinematically as opposed to theatrically by showing the same event from multiple perspectives in consecutive scenes. In the fall of 1903, Porter teamed up with Gilbert M. Anderson, the stage name of a theatrical actor born Maxwell H. Aronson, Aronson, who would soon become one of the most significant figures in Chicago's nascent movie scene. Tall, handsome, and only in his early 20s at the time, Anderson was a natural in front of the camera, but also worked behind the scenes as an ideas man, helping Porter to conceive motion picture stories. The two collaborated on multiple film projects for the remainder of the year. culminating in their final 1903 production, The Great Train Robbery, which was shot in November and released 1 month later. This game-changing movie would ultimately alter the destinies of both men forever. Although set in a nameless frontier region of the American West, The Great Train Robbery was filmed entirely in New York and New Jersey on studio sets as well as actual locations. The film tells the story of a group of bandits who rob a telegraph office at a train station, then board the train, where they proceed to rob both the safe and the train's passengers before making a daring getaway. Meanwhile, in an attempt to recover the stolen loot, the telegraph operator enters a saloon and rounds up a posse to go after the robbers. Among the innovative techniques employed by Porter are parallel editing, or cutting back and forth between the bandits and the telegraph operator to suggest simultaneous action, double exposure composite editing, or an early special effect that allowed information from multiple shots to be combined within a single frame, camera movement, or tilt, pan, and tracking shots are all utilized, as well as a primitive but delightful use of color tinting on some prints. Because each frame was tinted by hand and prints were typically projected at 16 frames per second, this was an extremely painstaking process. One of the most unusual aspects of the film is its ending. After a shootout in the woods, in which all of the bandits have been killed, Porter unexpectedly cuts to a close-up, the only one in the movie, for his final shot. One of the dead bandits has mysteriously reappeared to point his gun directly at the camera and shoot into the audience. The end. A now famous letter sent by the Edison Manufacturing Company to exhibitors across America actually gave them the option of projecting this shot either at the end or at the beginning of the movie. All versions of the film on home video, however, place the shot at the end, where its impact is undoubtedly most effective. In contrast to the Lumiere brothers, who had scared audiences unintentionally with their train film, Edwin S. Porter clearly intended to incite a frenzy with his more calculated assault on the audience. His shot would become one of the most iconic images of the early silent cinema, right alongside with the rocket ship hitting the man in the moon in the eye in A Trip to the Moon. Porter's image would also be widely imitated. It served as an inspiration for the opening of the James Bond movies, as well as the ending of Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas from 1990. In an interview in the late 1950s, Gilbert Anderson recalled Porter's rapid pace of production. Quote, "We made it all in 2 days. Then it was finished and taken to the reviewing room. After it was reviewed, they all looked up, and they were dubious whether it would go or not." And Porter said, quote, "Well, the only way we can find out is to try it out in a theater," end quote. The Great Train Robbery had its world premiere at Huber's Museum in New York City on December 1st, 1903. I'm going to gain the volume here a little bit for all of you. The Great Train Robbery had its world premiere at Huber's Museum in New York City on December 1st, 1903, where it played at the end of a vaudeville show. Legend has it that the audience was so enthusiastic that they demanded the film be run again and again before they would leave the theater. The following week, it opened in 11 theaters in the greater New York City area. It is impossible to know the exact box office figures, but by all accounts, the movie was a commercial phenomenon. After watching the film with one of these early audiences and noting their rousing reception, Anderson said to himself, quote, "That's it. It's going to be the picture business for me. The future had no end," end quote. The Edison Manufacturing Company likewise quickly realized that they had something special on their hands, as this description from a 1904 catalog indicates, quote, "This sensational and highly tragic subject will certainly make a decided hit whenever shown. In every aspect, we consider it absolutely the superior of any moving picture ever made. It has been posed and acted in faithful duplication of the genuine hold-ups made by famous and various outlaw bands in the far west, and only recently the East has been shocked by several crimes of the frontier order, which fact will increase the popular interest in this great headline attraction." End quote. One of the side effects of the movie's popularity was that other filmmakers immediately began to copy its techniques, one of them even remaking it shot for shot, as well as its individual moments. Train robberies, fights on tops of trains, and scenes of men being made to dance by having their feet shot at. All these moments all soon became standard conventions of the Western. And what comes to mind is the third Back to the Future film where they're shooting Marty's feet. Many years before John Ford's Stagecoach made it a respectable A-list genre in 1939. Another residual effect of the film's popularity was that many people associated with the production soon found themselves in demand for future motion picture productions. Although The Great Train Robbery, like all movies of its era, does not feature credits, a future movie star was nonetheless born. Gilbert M. Anderson, who played 3 different roles in the film: a robber, a train passenger who dies a spectacularly melodramatic death, and the man who is, quote, "made to dance," unquote, would eventually change his moniker again to Broncho Billy Anderson. He became the cinema's first true cowboy star. Historian Carlton C. LaHue, Lahue, notes that it was both ironic and fitting, given the make-believe nature of the movies, that its first Western star was born with the unlikely, and though LaHue does not say it, Jewish name of Aronson, and that at the time the Great Train Robbery was made, he could not ride a horse and had never traveled west of Chicago. I'm glad that this author points this out. This irony is probably what Clint Eastwood had in mind when he directed and starred in the poignant and highly personal 1980 comedy Broncho Billy, the fictional story of a New Jersey shoe salesman who decides to become the headliner of his own modern-day Wild West show. In an age of mechanical reproduction, long after the American West had actually been settled, the story of the original Broncho Billy must have resonated with many of the aspiring, authentic cowboy actors who followed in Anderson's footsteps. And we have a publicity photo here. It says, "Undated publicity photo of Broncho Billy Anderson, courtesy of the Chicago History Museum." And I don't believe this is in the slideshow that I currently have playing. But you have a more serious shot of Mr. Anderson here. Or Aronson. Alright, let's continue. After the Great Train Robbery, Anderson starred in 3 more Edison westerns in 1904 and 1905. Western Stagecoach Holdup, A Brush Between Cowboys and Indians, and Train Wreckers, all of which were variations on the basic formula of their first big hit. Anderson, however, had his own ideas about what constituted Western authenticity, and he wanted more creative control. In 1905, he left Edison Manufacturing to work for one of its chief competitors, the American Vitagraph Company. It was there that Anderson directed his first film, Raffles, The Amateur Cracksman. Anderson claimed to have taken the name Broncho Billy from a Western story by Peter Kyne, spelled Kyne, but it is also worth noting that Vitagraph produced a film about a character with that same name, starring Paul Panzer, around the time that Anderson worked there. The financial success of Anderson's directorial debut led to an offer the following year from William Seelig in Chicago, who was willing to allow Anderson to both direct and star in his own movies. After making a few successful Chicago shot shorts, Anderson traveled west to shoot a series of Seelig Polyscope westerns and stunt comedies on location in Colorado. All of these films were released in the spring and summer of 1907 and considerably boosted Seelig Polyscope's profits. Of these movies, only His First Ride and The Bandit King still exist today, and only as fragments. That's really unfortunate. So I'm looking. I had this. Actually, yeah. Let me bring this up real quick. Because I was looking at the list of films that this guy was in, and it ended up like every year he was doing so many. Here, I'll find it. Just give me a moment. Filmography. All right. So yes, I'm using Wikipedia, but just bear with me here. So we have The Bandit King and His First Ride. Where is that at? I guess it's not even in here. But you see how many films this... Like, just take a look at this. We got The Great Train Robbery in 1903. I'll blow this up bigger. We have The Great Train Robbery, The Messenger Boy's Mistake, What Happened in the Tunnel, that's for 1903. 1904, A Brush Between Cowboys and Indians, and Western Stagecoach Holdup. 1905, Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the Train Wreckers. 1906, The Female Highwayman. 1906, Who's Who, Dolly's Papa. Lights of a Great City, Life of an American Cowboy. 1907 has An Awful Skate, The Bandit King, Western Justice. 1908 has The Bandit Makes Good and The Baseball Fan. But then look at 1909. And then look at 1910. Like, he released 5 films in April of 1910. (1911). Again, we're looking at like 30 to 40 films for the year there. 1912. Again, he's just pumping them out. And only two exist till today. Only two. And they're partial, they're not even complete. So there was like 4 or 5 years where he was just pumping out all of these films. And then eventually he slows down. But you see the amount of films that are here? And I'm shocked that all of this is like not saved. I don't know how this was lost. Like, we understand here that the projectors were destroying the film copies. They were probably played until they couldn't be played anymore, is my guess. And once they were bad copies, they would just be thrown away or burned. And you also have to account for all the other films that caught fire while they were projecting. If they had something set up the wrong way, if they stopped the reel while the light bulb was still on, then that would burn the film, because the lack of motion would cause the celluloid to burn up. But look at all these. And of course, he slowed down a lot at the turn of the century. Really, he did only 2 films in 1922. And then he was on TV as himself. And then he played an old man in 1965 in The Bounty Killer. So he has quite a catalog of films, but they're no longer in existence. We only know of it from these historical accounts, which is really unfortunate. Okay, we are going to continue on reading here. Anderson and Selig, however, were not a good fit. Anderson thought his brief but successful run at Selig Polyscope meant that he deserved more money, or by some accounts deserved to be made a partner in the company. But Selig thought differently. Anderson promptly quit. Upon returning to Chicago from Colorado, Anderson met George K. Spoor, who had already made a fortune in the distribution business following his partnership with Edward Emmett. In a 1915 interview with Motion Picture Magazine, Anderson recalled convincing Spoor to start a Chicago-based studio that would rival the Selig Polyscope Company. According to Anderson, the agreement was that Spoor would put up the cash and Anderson would do the work. Spoor agreed to an initial investment of $2,500, 100 times the amount he had allegedly invested in Edward Emmett's Magnoscope a few years earlier. Again, this investment proved to be a sound one. The income from the very first Spoor-Anderson production would more than double Spoor's initial investment. In the summer of 1907, Spoor and Anderson incorporated as the Peerless Film Manufacturing Company, setting up headquarters at 501 North Wells Street, or in modern numbering, 1300 North Wells. 1300 North Wells. They recruited their cross-eyed janitor, Ben Turpin, Turpin, who had been hired at $15 a week to sweep the floor, to star in their first movie, the Anderson-directed stunt comedy An Awful Skate, or The Hobo on Rollers. The scenario, reminiscent of His First Ride, features Turpin crashing into various people and objects while roller skating around Chicago's Old Town neighborhood near the Peerless office. The scenes may have been staged but there was a little acting involved. Turpin really had no idea how to skate, and his inexperience is apparent in the film as he careens helplessly through the streets. In 1943, Spoor remembered the film vividly. Quote, "We started out right downtown in Chicago," unquote. He told the Chicago Daily News. Quote, "Anderson had only one actor, a tangle-eyed comedian named Ben Turpin. Anderson would take a cameraman, and chauffeur, and Turpin, and they'd go out and make a picture. First one was An Awful Skate. Anderson simply putting skates on Ben and paying bystanders $2 to let Ben skate down the street and get into a series of collisions with innocent pedestrians. For 2 years, we made nothing but comedies with Ben as our star. He made $50 a week. That's not bad. Start off as a janitor making $15 a week, and then you become an actor and make $50 a week. That's a good trade-off." In 1909, Turpin recalled the perilous nature of acting in Anderson's early stunt comedies. Quote, "I had many a good fall and many a good bump, and I think I may have broken about 20 barrels of dishes, upset stoves, and also broken up many sets of beautiful furniture. Had my eyes blackened, both ankles sprained, and many bruises, and I am still on the go." Unquote. That's a good attitude to have. An Awful Skate, which still exists today as a lengthy fragment, shows that Gilbert Anderson, as a director, understood the value of negative space in composing an image. He also understood the importance of pacing and slapstick comedy. Each shot features a different set of characters on a city sidewalk that Turpin's hobo comes crashing into. By the end of the film, a lot of the humor stems from the viewer's anticipation of the hobo's calamitous arrival in the frame. Ironically, while George Spoor had no problem infringing on copyrighted material by illegally duplicating the films of others as an exhibitor, he publicly complained as soon as he and Anderson, as producers, became victims of similar practices. Newspaper ads for the first Peerless movie were run in the following disclaimer, with the following disclaimer. P.S. An Awful Skate has been copied by a rival concern who employed spies to follow our camera. Our picture is the original and best value for your money. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. That means that people were following around his film crew and trying to just recreate the shots they were actually taking, and tried to pass it off as their own film production after the fact. That's real scummy. So you got all of these filmmakers that are being ripped off left and right. Piracy's running rampant, and this is all illegal, but it's still happening during this time. The rival concern referred to in the Peerless film advertisement was none other than the Selig Polyscope Company. While An Awful Skate premiered in theaters on July 31st, Selig's imitation film, titled The Roller Skate Craze, was released as soon as 3 days later. The only substantial difference between the two movies is that, in contrast to the Peerless Hobo, the lead character of Selig's film is a middle-class father and husband who, in the opening scene, puts his skates on at home. Other than that minor change, the concept is essentially the same. A man skates through the streets, constantly crashing into other people and falling down. There's a side note here. It says, one version of the roller skate craze, preserved by the Library of Congress and widely available to view online, has been re-edited into a rapid-fire Soviet-style montage lasting about 10 seconds. Selig may have created this version only with the intention of having something to deposit with the Library of Congress for copyright purposes. It is extremely unlikely that whoever cut it together intended it to be seen that way by audiences in 1907. The full-length version of the roller skate craze, several minutes longer and featuring a moderate tempo, can be seen only by visiting the George Eastman House International Museum of Photography and Film in Rochester, New York. I hope they digitize it. A crucial difference, though, is that Selig's actor seems to be a better skater than the hobo on rollers. In a scene where he falls down a flight of stairs, one gets the impression that the man is an accomplished pratfaller who probably worked in vaudeville doing slapstick. The stunts in the roller skate craze seem far more technically accomplished, though perhaps illustrating a difference between theater and film. They are not quite as funny to watch as the real hapless antics of Turpin in An Awful Skate. In the years ahead, it would become commonplace for Spoor, Anderson, and Selig Polyscope to release competing films on the same subject at the same time. E.g., dueling adaptations of John Greenleaf Whittier's poem Maud Muller, a practice that still exists between rival Hollywood movie studios to this day. What comes to mind is Pixar and DreamWorks doing Fish movies. That was something about 20 years ago. They were going head-to-head doing that. Produced for only a couple $100, An Awful Skate, it is estimated, made between $5,000 and $10,000 in profits, in spite of the challenge posed by Selig's knockoff. Hot on the heels of directing this first peerless film, Gilbert Anderson personally embarked on a cross-country tour to establish contacts with the regional film exchanges to which he and Spoor could sell prints of An Awful Skate. On July 22, 1907, Anderson wrote Spoor from the Hotel Henry in Pittsburgh. The letter indicates that distribution concerns like Pittsburgh's Calcium Light and Film Company recognized that Spoor and Anderson's inaugural film was a higher quality production than what was coming out of most of the other big studios at the time. Quote, Dear Spoor, Anderson, this is Anderson writing, arrived in Pittsburgh, okay. My apologies on that. But as you know by this time, without our film, as Hamilton failed to bring it to the hotel before train time. Consequently, I will be detained in the Smoky City another day. Nevertheless, I have visited the Pittsburgh Calcium Light people, and judging from their detrimental remarks about Edison, Selig, and Vitagraph films, our stuff will find a ready market. I will show our film to various buyers, and I think we will sell as many to them as any other concern outside of Pathé. I feel absolutely certain that we will get rid of 40 or 50 copies. If there is room on your advertising circular, make a mention of our steady photography and brightness of lighting. GM. So it's signed GM. The profits from An Awful Skate brought an influx of cash that allowed the Peerless Manufacturing Company to change its name and move into larger headquarters on the city's far north side. Rechristened the S&A Film Manufacturing Company, S&A being the phonetic pronunciation of the first letters of the last names of Spoor and Anderson. S&A. S and A. S&A. ESSANAY. S and A. That's very cool. The company's new studio address was 1333 West Argyle Street, which was soon expanded to also include 1345 West Argyle Street and Chicago's uptown neighborhood. St. Augustine College now owns this complex of buildings, which still stands relatively unchanged today. For the company logo, Spoor and Anderson chose the insignia of an American head, or of an. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. For the company logo, Spoor and Anderson chose the insignia of an Indian head wearing a feather bonnet that was designed by Spoor's sister Mary. The logo reflected the studio head's mutual love of the Western genre. And we'll take a look at that building once we're finished reading. We got 2 paragraphs left here. Spoor and Anderson, however, were otherwise a study in contrasts. Anderson had movie star good looks and an affable personality, while Spoor was a heavy-set, business-like man who had been described as unsmiling. When Charlie Chaplin went to work for S&A in 1915, he found that the 2 men frequently engaged him in sort of a good cop, bad cop routine. Somehow, though, their partnership worked. It would span a full 10 years and the production of approximately 2,000 movies, an eternity in the tumultuous, rapidly evolving era of early American film industry. To announce the formation of the new company, Spoor and Anderson proudly sent a joint letter to the moving picture world in 1908. Quote, "Dear Sir, the S&A Film Manufacturing Company announced to dealers, renters, and exhibitors of moving picture films the completion of their new film-making plant in Chicago, and especially request your attention to their new and original film subjects, which will be ready for the market at an early date, subsequent notice of which you will receive. Respectfully, George K. Spoor, Gilbert M. Anderson." End quote. With both Selig Polyscope and S&A now firmly established as local powerhouses, the rivalry of the 2 major Chicago studios was about to begin in earnest. And that is it for Chapter 6. So we're going to take a look at that building. Yeah, we might as well. So that's 1333. West Argyle. So thank you everyone for today. I'm going to try to end this under an hour. But for next time, I'm pulling up the photographs here, so just give me a moment. But next Saturday, we'll be doing Chapter 7, titled The Edison Trust. And that's about 8 pages. And that will complete part 2 of this book. And just for a sneak preview, after next week, 2 weeks from now, we will be starting The Golden Age of Chicago Film Production, part 3 of this book. And we'll see the height of S&A. But we'll be covering the Edison Trust next week. Okay, so let's get this Google Maps up. And we will look at this building that still exists today, which was for the S&A company. So here we have Google Maps. We have the location plotted. Let's zoom in a bit. Wow. Yeah, I can already tell from these little divider points here on the bricks that it is, in fact, the original here. Alright, so let's drop down and take a look. We're going to stand right outside the front of it. $13.33. There it is. One-story building. They said they expanded out into this secondary building here. So what you're looking at now is what used to be the S&A Film Company studio. Which is now part of St. Augustine College. And it says it remains relatively unchanged. So this is the original brickwork on the building. I do have a photograph from the next, or from 2 chapters from here. I'm not sure if this building, this front door, is exactly the same. But this could have been at the front. This could have been what we're looking at here. And all they did was take the facade down. Which is why they say relatively unchanged. So yeah, that will do it for today, everyone. I really appreciate you being here. And I hope this was informational, educational. My apologies on not being black and white today. I will try to do that again for next week. I just had to make sure I was getting all of these videos together from a few days ago with the Bell and Howell cameras, and also the slideshow today showing Broncho Billy. So I hope you appreciated all that, and next week we'll be getting into the Edison Trust, and these filmmakers are going to start slinging mud at each other, so to speak, because they're getting into their peak years of when they were producing, and eventually we will see the fallout of all of that infighting and competition. Some of them move out west and stay out west. That's what I've been wanting to cover with this whole series to begin with. And we need to know how it started. We need to know where chapter 1 began with the film industry, which is here in Chicago, and then how it expanded west. But the why of expanding west, I think, will surprise a lot of you. So, until the next one, class dismissed.